Welcome everybody to tonight's live session. I'm AJ Smith and I'm so excited you're here today to join me for another insightful conversation filled with actionable tips, expert advice, and real-world strategies to help you excel in real estate and in business. Before we begin, I do want to give you a quick reminder. I go live every Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Time with a brand new guest or a brand new topic. So mark your calendars and make this a weekly dose of inspiration. Whether you're an investor, an entrepreneur, or you're just curious about building wealth, this is the place to be. So tonight on Capital Conversations, I'm thrilled to introduce to you Chuck Noyd, who is an entrepreneur. He wears a lot of hats. He's the owner of River Road RV Resort and Marina, a construction company leader, and an Airbnb operator. Chuck's expertise spans multiple industries, and he's mastered the art of turning diverse ventures into thriving businesses. From creating a standout RV resort to managing successful construction projects and optimizing short-term rentals, Chuck brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. So tonight we'll explore how Chuck transformed River Road RV Resort into a destination hotspot, his strategies for maximizing cash flow and return on investment in RV parks and short-term rentals, some lessons from running a construction company and applying those skills to real estate, and some tips on scaling multiple businesses without sacrificing quality. So grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and get ready to learn from one of the most versatile entrepreneurs in the business. Without further ado, let's welcome Chuck to the show. Chuck,
how's it going?
How are you?
Not too bad, man. How you doing?
Good. I remember we met, it must have been about this time last year. We met at a local real estate meetup, and then we met up for coffee after that. And you were one of the folks that introduced me to a mastermind that has been very impactful for me. So I just wanted to start off by saying thank you.
Hey, no problem, man. Yeah, you took that advice and ran with it. That's for sure. So you're doing big things, which is cool, and which is, how I found a lot of good stuff, which is why I recommended the deal room to you, so you seem like a perfect fit.
I appreciate it. And I want to share your story because I know that when I was joining and since then, you've been crushing it in this RV space and you closed that first deal. And that's one of the things that inspired me to join that deal room, to join the mastermind. So can you just share the story with us of how you found and how you decided to invest in that RV resort? What drew you to that property?
Well, RV parks are just something I've been interested for a long time. I've camped for a long time, and starting to move from regular real estate into commercial real estate and starting to look at those. It just seemed like a great idea to do. And actually how I found it was Shane Albert, who's actually in the deal room as well. He posted in the deal room, "Hey, does anyone know anything about RV parks?" And that's the great thing about being in this with other people is I seen it, responded to him on it, finding out he's in Dixon, which is, 45 minutes to an hour away from us, thinking maybe he's halfway across the country, he's right down the road. And we hooked up and looked at it, and it was, kind of on from there. We realized what a gem this place could be when we seen it. It was rough, very rough, but it was a beautiful location and a beautiful area, and the numbers looked great. So we just kind of went after it, and everything that Jennings and Yaden teaches you, we went after it that way, and everything worked out exactly how they said they would if you just put the work in.
So tell us about that first time you saw it, right? It was rough. It was really rough. Can you just describe to us what were some of the things you saw? What were some of the things that maybe you saw as value adds? Maybe some things that were scaring you away a little bit, and how did you overcome those? How did that vision for that RV resort evolve over time?
Well, I can tell you I'm definitely not one that ever gets scared of much. We've done a lot of really terrible projects over the years, but this one, when I pulled in, I've traveled to a lot of places. If I were to pull in there with my RV, just not somebody trying to buy a place, I would have probably made a U-turn and pulled back out of there and went somewhere else. It looked pretty dilapidated. It didn't look like anybody had landscaped or trimmed anything for about 15 years. The garbage dumpster was one of the first things you seen when you came in, and it was overflowing with trash all over the place, and looked like everybody threw all their extra crap next to the dumpster, and just it was pretty gross. Nothing but weed whacked. Every tree had overgrowth around the bottom of it. Just pretty terrible. But the overall place was beautiful. You could see it, if it was cleaned up, that man, right along the Rock River, it's got a half a mile of shoreline, a bunch of people with docks, a marina. For me, that's done design and stuff throughout the years, instantly I could see this place had a ton of potential just as far as the looks goes, and then once we looked at numbers, it was like, man, this place really could be very awesome. So,
right. Let's talk about the numbers a little bit. So when people are thinking about commercial real estate, it's a little different from the residential side in that the numbers are a little different. The financing is a little different. So how did you make that jump from maybe doing some Airbnbs, which we'll talk about, maybe doing some residential real estate? How did you go about thinking about financing and acquiring and developing this resort?
Well, again, referencing Jennings and Yaden, they say find the deal and the money comes afterwards if you got a good deal. And they were, again, 100% correct. Once we did the underwriting that we had got, from Tim Vitale, you had to adjust it because it's for multifamily, but we had a good idea how to use it for an RV park and make it work for us to use the numbers. And everything on it looked really good as far as paying for itself and cash flowing and what it would look like pro forma coming up to rates where it was the same as everybody else around us, because it was very underperforming on that side big time. And even with an underperforming, it was going to be basically okay to take care of itself, at least enough to pay the bills, not make any money, but it would still suffice. You just wouldn't be able to do much. So that alone was very enticing, that you're not already on the wrong side. So from there, it was just looking at how we could shape it up, how many more spots we could add, the other kinds of things we could add to bring in more revenue, because they sell wood, propane, and that was about it. They had a really generic store on the inside, where now we got basically a convenience store, like a gas station. Also have a lot more to offer for those tenants that don't bring anything. We're getting a liquor license, so we'll have a bar inside of there. We'll also sell to-go alcohol to the community, so the bar will be open to the public. And just a lot of ways you can bring in revenue, because this is an entertainment business. People want a spot to go to, somewhere they can hang out, have fun, get away from crappy normal life. Gambling machines in there, which is going to be a great revenue maker as well. So there's just so much upside on an RV park as opposed to me from multifamily. You can raise the rent, sure. You might add some washers and dryers. Some places get crazy charge for a parking spot. That's all stuff people get upset about. You come to an RV park, it's like, oh, my kid wants ice cream. Well, let's get them all ice cream. And it's more of a happy business, I guess, than it is the other side. So that's what I really like about it a lot.
It's a vacation business, almost like a luxury. And so you have folks that are wanting to spend extra money on certain items, like maybe an ice cream machine or ice cream freezer. Yeah,
they're there for the weekend to have fun. They know they're going to spend extra money, just like if they're going to a water park or whatever, they're there to have a good time. If we've got the alcohol to sell to them, the food for them to buy, the charcoal, and we're showing them a good time, adding some extra amenities too, that their kids can come and have a good time. It's like being at Disney World. You kind of open up your pocketbooks because, you're there to have fun. And next thing you know, it's like, crap, I spent $500 today. So, we're there to show them a good time and make it a little easier to do that, I guess, not rob nobody, but give them all those extra things that they didn't have before. Instead of them having to leave all the time to go spend that money somewhere else, they can do it all in one spot. Obviously, that's better for everybody.
Enhancing the experience.
Correct. Yep, for certain. So there was so much upside on that they didn't do that. As Jane and I looked at it, it was just like, man, there's just endless potential with this place.
So I know you mentioned a few times, it sounds like you have partners. How did you find and build the trust with those partners?
Well, most of them I know from the Deal Room and another group called The Core. Several of the guys are in both. So when we came to start doing the numbers, I had a few people I knew to call. Tom Rivenbank was one of them, and I sent the underwriting to him, and he knew several other people. Steve Outlaw, there was a couple of our investors that came aboard for the CapEx side. We had it set up to where we weren't going to need to do that. We were just going to have to do the down payment. We got a $100,000 carryback from the owner, so we only had to come up with $77,000 for the down payment on it. Purchase price was $1 million with their $100,000 carryback. Which the bank, we disclosed to them, hey, this is what we're going to do. We'll have a second position. They had no problem with that going towards the down payment, because I know we've heard places where that's a problem. So we just immediately let them know, hey, is this an option? Because we didn't want it to be something that screwed us up at the end by some people say, hey, just don't mention it or whatever, so maybe you can slide it through. We didn't want that to be the case. We want to have a good relationship with the bank. So they gave Shane and I the green light. Shane and I are the main partners on it. They gave us a green light on the financing, and that was probably one of the most exciting days. Going from small loans, getting approved for $1 million loan was pretty awesome. That we basically KP'd our own deal. So, but when the appraisal came in at $50,000 more than our purchase price. Kind of feel like the guy didn't know what he was looking at when he was looking at the numbers, because the numbers said something completely different, but it is what it is. So they backed off on giving us a line of credit towards what we were going to do for CapEx. So then we wound up having to do a capital raise for that.
Gotcha. And you mentioned the bank. Did you choose to use a credit union, a large bank, another source outside of the seller carryback? How did you choose which type of financing to use?
Well, actually, we chose a local bank up there that Shane had a relationship with from before called Sauk Valley Bank. They're from that area. We sent the deal to them, and we didn't wind up having to go anywhere else. We thought maybe we might have to shop it around, but immediately they get a personal relationship than just like a board committee. So he worked with us a lot better, and they came back with, they were okay with the deal. And then there were things we had to learn because of it being a JV deal to keep anyone else from having to be on the loan. People got to be under 10% ownership. Some places are, I think, like 18 to 20% or more. Then you have to be on the note, whereas this bank was 10. So we had to kind of change how much somebody could give us. So we had to use a few more people instead, because we had to keep the numbers lower so we don't have to have people signing on the main mortgage.
And there's a lot of operators that use syndications. There are some that use JVs. How did you decide upon a JV versus maybe like a 506B or a 506C syndication, raising money from either accredited investors, non-accredited investors? How did you choose a joint venture?
Well, we couldn't do the 506C because we're not in that ability to do it. The joint venture, just from talking with Shane and Tom, seemed to be the better, not necessarily easier, but less paperwork way of doing it. And we were still small enough that we could do it that way without it being a problem. So, between lawyers and filings, it was just a better way to get it structured to do the deal.
And once you took over the deal, once you took over the RV park, what were some of the first big changes or improvements that you made?
Cleaning it up, the landscaping. We closed January 24th, and January 25th, I was up there and we were taking trees down and vines. And there's two beautiful creeks that interconnect throughout the park, two on top of the river, that we cleaned up. And just that alone made a huge difference. Taking down dead trees and branches that were in the way of stuff, and just opening up the view. There were several spots of the river you couldn't even see because there was so much crap growing around it. So that was one of the first things everybody noticed when they first pulled in. They're like, oh my God, I can see from here to the river now. I can see the pavilion. There's just trash piled everywhere. So that was honestly the curb appeal was the largest thing, and we're still dealing with some of it. They had a boneyard where some scrap guy stored a bunch of crap and torched it and took it apart and took it to the scrapyard as he could, and people had abandoned campers and he'd take them apart on their site. They had like a trash dump out back, so we had to clean a lot of that up, get an old RV out of there that had been there for 5 years. And we knocked down about 4 acres worth of trees and are going to be graveling it to put a storage area so everybody's boats and docks are stored in a better area. Plus it creates a new storage area for us that we're charging for. So, again, extra revenue for things like that, for keeping stuff on site. We have a pole building up top that we store boats and jet skis and golf carts in. We got room to add on to that because there's more people that want that storage than what we had room for. And we got quite a bit in there. So we got room to add on to there. We got room to add another 50 to 60 sites to add on to our seasonals. So, and then have weekend traffic and tent traffic, which tent traffic, we didn't really know what to expect because they didn't have that tracked too terribly well. And for anyone doing RV parks, man, that is a huge benefit that we didn't really realize. I can fit tenters for $35 a night in the same spot. I can fit one camper for $54 a night. And they don't bring anything with them. So they're going to be in the store buying stuff, buying the alcohol, buying the food, going to the bar, whereas seasonal people, they got refrigerators and kitchens and stuff like that where they got pretty well stocked up, or they're bringing stuff from home. So that the tenting business was a lot bigger hit than what we were expecting this year. So that's definitely something we're going to market towards.
I was going to say, how do you market toward them? How do you attract those people, either the tenters or the folks who are bringing in the RVs or the boats? How do you attract them toward your park in particular?
We'll have to have specific different ads, just, ads showing just tenting and then ads showing just RVing, but also through Facebook ads, just targeting certain areas up in Chicago. Now that I know the demographic of people that are coming tenting at our place, because we get a lot of the suburb folks, but it's very specific. We had a lot of Ukrainian folks, a lot of folks from Belarus, and a lot of Polish folks, because there's a large Polish population, and they love tenting. They don't want to own campers. They enjoy the experience of tenting, and a lot of them have been coming to this park for years. So now that we have their zip codes and stuff from them running their cards, we can target their areas and their neighborhoods, because they all live in the demographic of those folks that want to do the same thing. They're all in large Polish neighborhoods. So we can Facebook ad, target anybody on Facebook in those neighborhoods as, hey, and show pictures of their friends and put them in Polish or put them in Ukrainian language, because they're, like I said, a very large populations of them up there. And man, they come down and they spend an awful lot of money, and they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of really good people. So we can definitely target it very specific that way. Plus, we're doing 4 shows this year. We're going to be doing the one in the Quad Cities at the QC Expo Center. So definitely come see me. Doing one in Springfield, one in Rockford, and one at the Rosemont up in Chicago.
So you mentioned a lot of stuff that you guys have added in. What would you say has been the most impactful feature that's attracted the most people, or that people have complimented you guys about the most?
Well, 2, remodeling the bathrooms, because they looked absolutely horrid, and now they look, they're very nice, very high-end looking. I bought a water slide, an inflatable water slide, through Facebook, because I had rented one, and just the kids came out of the woodwork to be on there, and everybody's like, man, that's the funnest thing they've done in a long time. Wound up happened to find one for sale right in the backwoods there, and bought it from the guy and set it up. And it didn't matter where I went in that area. I could be 50, 60 miles away, mention the campground, and people be like, oh, we've seen the water slide up and all the people on it. And it's been probably the best marketing thing, let alone the funnest thing for people to do. We got so many compliments for that. And then I wound up buying an inflatable Ninja Warrior course. So just between those 2 things and fixing the pool up, we turned the heater on in the pool, which they had forever and they never did. So it stayed at 85 all the time. And between those things right there, people are super thrilled, because they were actually able to use the long, as opposed to, they said they used to do what was called shock the system, jump in and get right back out, because they needed to cool down, but you couldn't stay in it because it was like a polar plunge.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys have found a couple ways to stay unique amongst, even if there were other parks or a lot of other parks in the area. You have the water slide, you have the Ninja Warrior course, you've got the heated pool.
Yeah, we are having bands. We've had DJs, just trying to give entertainment to do on the weekends. Next year, we'll have more activities and stuff for kids to do. It wasn't necessarily a totally kid-friendly environment. There really wasn't much for them to do. Kids had a tendency to get yelled at by the old owners for doing too many things, like playing in the creek or different stuff that kids want to do. Now it's back to like, that's the kind of reason you're there, to be a kid and have a good old time and, get muddy and dirty and explore. So that kind of vibe and environment has been a big change. We've gotten a lot of compliments of people. We're happy to see that.
How do you guys approach pricing for the RV spaces, for the marina slips? How do you stay competitive and maximize revenue at the same time?
Well, we searched around other areas around us. There's a ton of campgrounds around us. That was another reason this one was attractive, is there's so many other campgrounds around us that we could maybe draw seasonals from. But we looked at how they were pricing. I've been a seasonal at a place, and I know where I'm at was double for what a lot of the folks were at this place, and the amenities weren't even the same, nor the spaces or any of that. So without even having to come anywhere close to what I was at my last campground, and adding stuff, it could be a win for both of us, where they're getting a lot more stuff. A lot of people had complaints about things that have just been broken and not fixed for years, whether it be dead trees everywhere, or their power not working, or water lines to snuff. So we've been working at fixing all that stuff that's just been let go and ignored. They had a long punch list of complaints by pretty much everybody there. So we've been trying to be diligent at getting to everybody's stuff, saying, we're not just trying to raise your rent and take your money. We're needing to fix stuff. Things cost. We've got a mortgage now, but we're going to put it back into the park. Like buying the water slide and the inflatables. You got to give more amenities and fix the place up and give them stuff to do. And just like in your own neighborhood, you want your place to be nice. So that's trying the vibe we're trying to put out there. And since we've been doing it, a lot of folks have been fixing their places up and doing a lot of stuff with us, which has been nice.
And you mentioned, things break very much like whether it be a single family house, an apartment, a hotel, anything you might invest in, you're going to have challenges and you're going to have things that are unexpected. What would you say was the biggest operational challenge that you faced so far, and how did you solve for that?
No, nothing was too terrible of a challenge. It was just having 80 people wanting something done right now. You don't have to explain to them if each one of you've got a one-day project that puts somebody 80 days out. They're the last one in line. It was managing people's wants that are all in one spot to see that, why are you over at Jerry's, when I asked to be over here? So there was everybody seeing stuff change. They started wanting stuff right away. So it was just trying to manage the expectation of like, hey, we're going to get to it. I don't want you to think we're forgetting about you, but we got a lot of other stuff we got to get to, and trying to manage all of that so everybody kind of keep them happy, thinking that you're not ignoring one person over the other. Definitely was difficult. And it seemed like every weekend something crazy would happen between we had a tree fall down and land on a camper, but it was lucky enough that 2 bottom branches stuck in the ground and stopped it right on top of the camper. Like before it did any damage. It was the most crazy thing. But the thing I loved the most about the park when I ended is how everybody there's been there a long time and know each other, and they all help. I go over there with my guy to start cutting the tree up. There's 20 people there with chainsaws and blowers helping me cut it up and drag it out and clean it up. And before you know it was done. It would have taken me and another guy the entire night to have done that. They just willfully come over and do everything, which is amazing. There are a lot of really good people. So that's a good added bonus. So the more you folks too, the more you get out as well. So it creates a good environment.
The more you give, that you get back in
Correct.
kind of a circular way. Yeah.
Sure.
Were there any unexpected regulatory hurdles like zoning or permits that you had to deal with?
No, being where we are out in the county, I was concerned doing our due diligence. I called the Army Corps, DNR, county, all those kinds of people wanting to know what we got to worry about. And for the most part, the biggest thing I had to deal with was EPA. We had the inside of our park is not allowed to have a septic system because of the fact we're on the river. If it were to flood, you can't have a leach field because it would contaminate the water. The building side has one, and they had what was called a discharge pipe, and they had to do all this crazy paperwork every single month with all these numbers wanting to know if you've had any sort of discharge from that field into the creek, because that discharge pipe goes into the creek. Well, there's never been a discharge. So the EPA guy that we were dealing with is a really nice guy. He's helped me walk through this stuff that we didn't even know about until we bought the park, unfortunately. He helped me locate where this pipe was because it had been buried in the ground forever. We were able to get it dug up, capped off, send in the proper paperwork, to the EPA, and to where we no longer have to do these reportings. Because if you didn't do these reportings, man, they were going to come down on you with hell's hammer. Apparently, you didn't have these numbers every month wanting to know if you're destroying the creek by any means with any sort of contamination from sewer. So that was a pretty big new one I had to deal with before. So we've had public health. They show up and just kind of inspect stuff randomly, but that wasn't too bad. They gave me a list of stuff to fix. That was fairly simple. So there's been a lot of regulatory stuff I'm not used to. I did a lot of government contracting in my business, so I'm used to dealing with those kinds of folks. Usually it's just a human being on the other end. Everybody's kind of scared about oh my God, they're from the state of Illinois, from public health, or all this paperwork, and they send you a letter with all this jargon on it. Half of it's just nonsense that they have to put into something. You call them like, hey, Steve, what are you looking for? Put a GFI in here, cap that's off over there, send me a picture, we're good. But the email you got scares you. So I wasn't too concerned with that because I had a pretty good idea with government before. So that part hasn't been too bad as long as you're not on the phone yelling at somebody.
Right. And it sounds like you've pulled in your experience as a construction, an owner of a construction company in order to navigate some of those things. Let's kind of pivot into that just for a little bit. Can you share a little bit about how did you get into the construction business? Let's just kind of start there. What did that look like?
Well, my very first job, I was at Menards. I was there for 4 years and worked in every department there. And then I wound up going to Lowe's. Then I went to kitchen and bath design over in Davenport, KBD now, and did kitchen design. All hand-drawn pictures, not computer, AutoCAD. We did everything by hand because I had learned to do it that way through school. Then from there, I went into sales for Acre Company, actually doing in-home sales. Went to another company called By State Home Improvement, doing sales as well. Learned a lot about numbers and how to price things, selling stuff, contracts when I worked there. Then I moved down to Florida with my brother and actually got into the construction side of stuff and started building houses and then doing hurricane remodels because we had a lot of hurricanes. Did a lot of commercial work and then just decided after seeing what was possible, I learned a lot from my boss down there. He taught me a ton. I asked him questions all day long, and he told me, he goes, I can tell eventually at some point you're going to start doing this yourself. He goes, you wouldn't be asking me these questions if you weren't. And I was like, you're probably right. So I wound up moving back up here. I worked for myself down there for about a year, came back up here, started working through Rock Island Economic Growth, doing rehab programs through there and Project Now. Got into doing jobs over through the city of Davenport and just got my license over there, did a bunch with them, and then just started selling more and more jobs. When got my roof license, started selling roofs. We got into commercial roofing, did a few hotels, some coffee shops, some scooters, like they have in town here now. We traveled out of town for a little bit, did some work, but it was just a constant grind to keep that much money flowing in to pay everybody. I had up to 20 guys 20 something guys at one point that I was employing, and some of them at pretty good wages, almost $40 an hour. So, when you think of those payrolls every Friday night, but our checks aren't coming in for another 3 months from the jobs we're doing, plus the 90 grand in materials you just bought. It was a constant fight, a lot of time involved, a lot of not seeing my kids. And then I started going to these meetups for investments for real estate, trying to find more guys to do work for. And as I sat and listened, I'm like, wait a minute, I should be on this side, not that side. This guy's writing me a check and taking off to Florida for 6 months. It's like, I want to do what he's doing. I want to have my time back. And that was right when COVID started. So we got into buying some houses to flip. My appointments dried up, disappeared. Nobody let me in their house anymore. It was just kind of perfect timing because I was wanting to find a way out of it. So we started buying some rentals, came across some, really good deals, just learning how to do, no money down, no payments, no interest. I got one of them on for a year from a guy, just creative financing, and then started buying flips and learned how to basically not have to put any money into any deal, and just kind of went from there with that, and realized starting getting into rentals, really gave my freedom back to myself. I could bring my kids with me if I had to go to work, but I didn't have to work as much. I'm not going to appointments all night. It just was a better path to freedom and retirement, I guess.
And at some point you pivoted from rentals. I think you mentioned to me that you've done short-term rentals.
Yeah, I got an Airbnb. I sold my personal house and we went and traveled for a little while, and we put that into an Airbnb. And that has honestly been one of the better investments I've ever done. It's been pretty solid booked since the day I started it. I started getting bookings 4 days after we put it on, and it is paid for itself every single month and then some. If I could get a few more of those, it would be fantastic, I'm kind of working at the, buying the RV park was a big undertaking. So it's kind of taking my attention away from some of the other stuff I was doing so we could get this thing up to where it needs to be, because this is a fantastic, life-changing investment. So I put a lot of attention into this thing. So eventually I'll get into getting a few more Airbnbs, but the one I've got so far has been pretty killer. It's a fairly simple hands-off business for the most part. My cleaner comes in and out. I got maintenance guys to go take care of stuff if I'm not around. It's just basically answering messages on the app and being on top of stuff for people.
Solid. And looking back, it seems like you've had quite the journey, starting in construction and then moving into rentals, then short-term rentals, and now you're in the RV park space. Is there anything looking back that you would do differently as you approached running or upgrading this specific RV park, now that you've had all this experience and now that you've actually bought the park? Is there anything that you would change?
Yeah, I would have done it sooner. I would have went after something like this sooner. Honestly, it was to having the mindset change from being in the deal room and listening to Jennings and Yaden just tell you, you just go after it and here's how you do it. And if you just try, you'll make things happen, and it started making me realize that that's what's happened with everything else I've ever done. I've been basically self-employed since I was 27 years old, and I'm 45 now. We've made those jumps always, and you'll get what you put into something if you really, really want it. I've seen you do that, and it's just skyrocketed because you put such an effort out there. Look what you've landed, and that's because you put that effort out there. I mean, you don't do anything sitting on a couch, that's for certain. But it was just changing your mind from the fact that I can only buy $100,000 house to if I find a $5 million property, I know from knowing these folks that if I got the right deal and I know what I'm talking about, people will get on board with you. And that was just life changing to find that and realize that holy cow, you can do this without having to worry about, I got to have 40 places performing with tons of equity to be able to buy this next place. So that was once I realized that and believed in it and bought into it, it worked.
Are you familiar with the cash flow quadrant, Robert Kiyosaki?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think what's beautiful about your journey, I'm thinking about that book, and you go through every single one of those quadrants almost sequentially.
Pretty much, yes. When I looked at it too, it was it really makes sense when you see the cycle of what people are in.
Yeah. And, you started in the construction space, and then you started to sell some of those things. You created your own business, started employing 10, 20 guys at once. And you started to look at your time and value your time, and then notice how you can then leverage money in order to get some of that time back. And you
Correct.
Also, it looks like from what I'm hearing, you started to understand that it's a matter of who is going to help me buy that $5 million building, rather than how am I going to figure out how to do it.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. It really is. I'm a firm believer you put that energy out there, but also go after it. And between those two things, you'll make stuff happen for certain.
So it seems like in your team, you're very much the operations guy. I would love to dive into that, because that seems like that's one of your big areas of expertise. How do you handle day-to-day management, especially, staffing, guest relations at the RV park?
So far, I do quite a bit of it myself as we're trying to fill in positions and just see what we need. Eventually, a lot of it's just going to be automated. We're working on a site through a company called CampSpot. It does a lot of RV parks throughout the country, whereas you go to our website and you go to click on, reserve spot, you then jump to their website without realizing it. And then they control everything as far as checking in, finding where your spot is. You'll be able to come into our place and just basically scan your phone. Gate will open. You're going to site 29. Camping's pretty self-sufficient for the most part. Unless your breaker's not working at your box or your water's not turning on, you don't need to interact with me a whole lot if you don't have to. So that's what we're trying to do, is to keep that down where we don't need. We'll basically need a maintenance guy, probably two. One full-time, one part-time to work through the weekend and stuff. During the week, not so much once we have most stuff taken care of. We've been using a lawn service so that we don't have to employ people to do that stuff. Eventually, we will take care of it when we need to worry about stuff like that. Right now, we're sourcing it out because I can't really beat the price I'm getting these high school kids to do it at. They're taking care of what they do. So eventually, we hope to not really have a whole lot of staff. The convenience store will be cameras and a self-checkout. I don't want to have, again, camping is for the most part, 99.9% of the people coming out are fairly responsible, good people on a luxury vacation. I'm not necessarily worried about them robbing the store. So I can trust putting cameras in there, having a self-checkout. We can link stuff to seasonal people's accounts. All you got to just go type your number, boom, put it in, puts it on your card because you're in the swimming pool. You don't have your card or anything like that with you. But I also don't have to worry about, 16-year-old Tom showing up to work because he went out drinking with his buddies last night after the football game. I don't want to have to worry about those staff problems like you do when you're in the construction business. So we'll have an assistant manager at some point or another. But other than that, we hope to not have to have a whole lot of staff.
And it sounds like you guys have learned a lot. You're growing the park. You're implementing some of the lessons that you've learned. What would you say is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who's considering buying or operating their first RV park?
Just do it if you think you want to. Don't let the doubt scare you. That's for certain. for me, from coming from the construction business, being in having 20 different jobs in 10 different cities, 30 miles apart all the time, logistically, it's a lot easier being in one spot as far as I'm concerned. Everybody's like, man, this must have been a crazy year. I'm like, no, this has been great. It's like I've been able to be in the same place managing a lot of stuff in one spot. I haven't had, if I needed to go check something, I get in a golf cart and drive across the campground. It's not as bad as hooking a trailer up and going 30 miles away to something, and realizing the tool they needed is 20 miles in the other direction, So I would say do it. There's not as much to do as you really believe there is with doing it, especially if it's something that's been set up and running. If it's been set up and running, you really just need to come in and kind of tweak stuff and see where they're lacking and improve that.
Yeah. And when you were looking at, the RV resort and yourself and where you see yourself, what do you see in the next, few years? Where do you see that going? Do you see yourself buying more? Do you see yourself pivoting toward the short-term rentals? What's next?
I'd say both. I definitely, once we get this one under wraps and running perfect, I definitely want to expand into buying more. Not so much where you need to buy 50 of them and now it's just crazy. I'd like to slow growth and controlled quality growth, I guess. Find good parks. I think my preference would always be now being on the water. That's just something I've always liked anyways. It just gives an extra added desired location, for people to come to. But I think I will definitely like to buy more RV parks. I'm still interested in buying more Airbnbs. I'm not so much into the tourist destination Airbnbs after having the one I have in the location we do in the Quad Cities, because we're more of a pass-through area where just people come all the time because they have to for different reasons. I feel like those are the kinds of cities you really need to look for, just constant traffic, and they're not overrun with 17,000 Airbnbs. We got a couple hundred in the Quad Cities, and I allow dogs, so that already knocks it down to like 50. So you're a lot more likely to get booked in those kinds of areas. I don't think I'm ever going to be a Panama City Beach guy or Myrtle Beach. It's overdone too much. So I'm definitely still interested in multifamily and other stuff like that, but having been in the RV park now, I'm just how much more exciting it is. The entertainment side of it is what really inspired me is Jimmy Thorpe. I don't know if you've seen him. He owns the resort down in St. Croix, and seeing that he did that and he's living this job of entertaining people, that was like, man, I should buy an RV park, and really kind of went after it. And it's been fun. It's business and real estate all at the same time, so it's like a perfect mix.
Yeah, and it's something that you love too. It sounds like you're someone who already enjoys the RV park space, like
Correct.
Enjoying going to those and checking them out. So it's a business that you enjoy outside of just having it be a job or a business that you own.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a passion for certain.
So we do have an audience question from Jamar Mills. Jamar, thanks for posing a question to us. He said, do you prefer long-term tenants or short-term tenants? Also, does that make a difference in terms of getting lending on them, whether it's long-term or short-term tenants?
As far as on the RV park?
As far as the RV parks, yep.
I like having the seasonal because, you have a guaranteed income basically, as long as, they had a pretty solid base of people that have been there a long time. It wasn't all like new people that just signed up last year that you're not sure if they're going to be back next year. I like that because you have it's like buying an apartment building where it's 90% occupied already. With good paying tenants, it's not 90% occupied, but 50% paying. It was 90% occupied, 100% paying. So that is definitely something very good to look at. It just depends upon the tenants, because I've been in some states where that RV park is more like a lesser form of a mobile home park. So it's not really an RV park. It's just where a bunch of campers are parked at. So you really got to be kind of careful when you're looking at that stuff.
But how would you differentiate between the two? Like, let's say I see an RV park, but it's kind of the former of what you're talking about. It's almost posing as a mobile home park. How would you differentiate between those? How would you suss out between the two?
You could basically tell just from pictures, aerial photos. You can zoom down and see they have zero amenities, and just see the location and almost instantly go, oh yeah, never mind. So address, very, very easily on Google Maps. Was when I was traveling, that was the first thing I did, because you'd see the stuff on Google. Oh, Johnny's RV park, and it's like, oh, okay, and I zoom on it, and it's behind some torn down building in the middle of Alabama in a cornfield, and everybody's campers are laying on the ground with no tires, and it's like, not staying there with the family. So that's a huge help these days, is having to Google, with the maps and stuff. That was the first thing I always do, is aerial photos, and then if it does a drive-through, to be like, oh, looks like a pretty decent place. All right, let's see what the numbers look like.
It sounds like you look for, would this be a fun spot to vacation?
Correct. Yeah. Why would you come here? That's why I look at it. Like, what is your reason to come here? Our campground is an hour and a half away from the suburbs of Chicago. Most of the folks there are from the suburbs. For them, they're in a concrete jungle with no yard, loud, busy, crazy traffic. They can come out there an hour and a half away and be on the river, have a boat, have a fire in the backyard, drive their golf cart, have a drink over to the neighbor's house and play some bags. It's just a better experience, but they get to, it's like their vacation house, so that's what we looked at for us. And the fact there's a lot of campgrounds around, and there's some destination stuff to do in the area. I look for those kinds of things when I'm looking at places, because I looked at them in Missouri, Texas, and flew down to one to Tampa to look at one. And you just to find out, like, why would somebody come here? Because if there's no real good reason to draw people to that area, then I'm really not going to be interested in it. Because you definitely want to have some sort of reason not only come to your park, but what also is in the area for families to go explore.
Right. Why would families come? It sounds like part of it now is the Ninja Warrior course, the water slide, and a few other things, the events that you guys have going on there as well.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So, and in the community that we're close to is a beautiful area, lots of stuff to do. So there's, we can piggyback off of them for events. There's a dragway 5 minutes down the road from us that is busy every single weekend. We've had some overflow folks for that we can try to advertise towards next year as well. So a nuke plant fairly close. We get, to answer that question more, we get a lot of weekend traffic, but we also get some monthlies, quite a bit of monthlies this last year, because the nuke plant does shutdowns every year and they bring in workers. So I had like 12 guys at $700 a month for a couple months extra coming in. So it's just, all avenues are great to have. Having a good base of seasonals is great, but I would definitely always want to go after the weekend traffic, and the monthly traffic is, they bring in good money as well, and they come and have a good time and spend a lot of money on that weekend.
Nice. And in terms of, you'd mentioned some red flags, right? Some of the things that you want to keep an eye out for. Maybe it's Google Maps. Is this actually a mobile home park rather than an RV park? If I'm trying to invest in an RV park, what would you say are some of the other red flags that you've learned about? Hey, I should keep an eye out for XYZ things in the future RV parks that I look for.
Well, we were chatting before we got on here, like with this one, they sell gas, and they had a gas pump on the water. And that was one of the first things I saw when we came up to the water was that. So I asked them, do you have a phase one environmental report? And they just, the realtor kind of blew me off on it a little bit, and like, oh, no, we don't need nothing like that. I'm like, you have a gas pump. I mean, you 100% need to have something clearing us, that there's been any sort of contamination. And they just kind of kept blowing us off about that. So through our due diligence, I was able to, after having stayed the weekend, once we got our LOI signed, talking with people and just asking questions and prodding and prying, I mentioned that I was certain I felt there was a gas tank in the ground there. And these people have been trying to sell it for 2 years, and the folks that have been staying there have been looking for something to happen. So they were more than willing to kind of offer up stuff to me. So they let me know that, yeah, there was a gas tank in the ground. So then we wound up having to have a company come up and do a GFR scan on the ground to actually locate it. They prodded the ground, tested the ground, and then we wound up having to have it removed because it was 10 feet away from the river in the ground. So if it had contaminated, it would contaminate the river. I mean, it could be millions of dollars in cleanup fees if it would have been put on us. In turn, it cost us $30-something thousand to have that tank between all the testing and having it removed and backfilled, 30 something grand to have it done before we ever even closed on that park. So definitely due diligence is a big deal. Knowing what to look for. All commercial, you should ask for a phase 1 environmental. And if they have one or don't have one, everybody has to have what's called an NFR letter from the EPA, which is, it says you need no further remediation. And that was what they couldn't give us. They kept saying, well, then they want to tell us they had a phase 1 report. I said, okay, well, let me read it. And their lawyer was trying to tell us, see, it says it's clear. I said, yeah, but you do not have an NFR letter, which means they're trying to tell us somewhere in this letter, we need to go to phase 2. So we kept having to have that battle until they finally agreed that I was right. Phase 2 proved that this tank needed to come out of the ground. And then once that tank was out of the ground, we were able to get that NFR letter, which our bank would not have let us close had we not gotten that yet. So it was something I've never dealt with before, but I've been in some classes to know to ask these questions, which was a big help, because that could have been a huge deal breaker for us if we bought that place and that thing was leaking gasoline into the Rock River.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's huge that you were able to identify that beforehand. It sounds like through education and through networking, which is fantastic. So
Correct.
That's a huge red flag that you were thankfully able to discover before you closed and before it became a major issue. Any other things that you've learned either through your time operating or through other educational sources or through networking that you can say, hey, who's looking to close on an RV park, check this out?
Yeah, I mean, making sure they give you all their financials if they're having a hard time getting them over to you, but they're trying to sell a place. You know, makes you kind of wonder why you already have this stuff in line already. Theirs weren't totally complete. There was some stuff in it as far as what, I apologize, I've had dogs everywhere between outside and mine in here wanting to go out. But some of the stuff we could tell wasn't quite complete, and maybe some cash wasn't being shown because of the tending business. But the complete financials and then just backpedaling on stuff, I guess, would be red flags. When you're asking questions, you're not getting straight answers. You know you're heading down the right path with something, you know, and to just be diligent and to stay at that. People will like to hide stuff, and in commercial, you can hide whatever. You know, you really have to find it. They do not have to tell you. So that was definitely different for me, who I trust people way too much, you know, to have to really just be like, hey, listen, I don't believe you. And we have to keep going for them on to finding out we were correct and finding there was a bigger problem.
Yeah. If someone is looking for due diligence advice, or if they're looking to buy an RV park, what would you direct them toward, and or who would you direct them toward?
Definitely reach out to me. I definitely, love to help and answer questions as much as I possibly can, for sure. There's not a lot of really good stuff out there. Honestly, we looked all over the internet trying to find good things that could help us take care of like the underwriting for RV parks, the due diligence. There really isn't good courses. It was just searching out stuff all over the internet and putting all the information together and making the best decision we possibly could with that information. There's several people in the deal room that have RV parks, in the core that have RV parks. So I reached out to several of them and kind of asked them what they thought about stuff. So networking is a huge deal, so if there's several groups online, RV parks for sale and RV park buyers that are on there that you can be in, that people definitely answer a lot of questions for you too. But I'm actually working towards trying to figure out, I was going to talk to you later about trying to put something a little more specific together, because you're really good with that organizational stuff, because there isn't a lot of really good courses or classes or no wall or due diligence checklists. We kind of came up with one that we did through several that I put together just through going through 3 other parks before this one, that several people have asked me that I kind of sent over to them to use. But we're trying to work on some a little bit more specific, just because unfortunately there isn't like there is multifamily or self-storage.
Yeah. And we'll take one more question. We've got another one here from Jamar. He says, in terms of due diligence, under what circumstances would a septic system not be a deal killer within an RV park?
Well, we don't have a septic system other than what's with the building. So we have to do pump outs for everybody. I mean, for me, a septic system, I see it in a broader, I can fix and have done stuff done, haven't been in the construction field, it's just pipes, tanks, really, honestly, if you need to replace one. If you got an entire park to redo, no matter what they say, if they've got a septic system in the park, you need to have it all checked. Calling a local plumbing company or a local drain company, because they'll probably be cheaper. Drain cleaning companies have scopes. They're usually a better cost per hour than what a plumbing company is. You can have them come in and scope the entire park. If you get it under contract, if you get an LOI signed, that is one of those things you have to realize might be a cost of your due diligence, because I bet we spent $6,000-7,000 on due diligence, and if we didn't get the deal, that was just money we lost. So it's definitely, you need to make sure when you put that LOI out and they're going to go into due diligence process that you're pretty sure you want this deal to work out, because you are going to spend some money. You will have to have lines scoped at an RV park if it's got it, or a mobile home park, because you want to make sure there's no collapsed lines anywhere. But also ask the people there, because they're going to tell you, if they're having a problem with their toilet backing up, they want you to know, yeah, man, every time I come out here on the weekend, my toilet overflows. Nobody wants that. So, like what we did the second we got on an LOI, I went and stayed the weekend there. And that's how I found out about the gas tank. I went and spent a whole week and asked people questions. Hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? What do you think about this? What's your major complaint about this place? You will find everything you need to know out, and then some. But with the septic system, if you have to have it completely replaced, you'd be looking at a couple $100,000, depending upon the size of the park. If it's 30 people, it might be $50,000. If it's a 200 plus park, if you got to tear up roads and all that stuff to redo everything, that's going to be a problem. So you want to know how old the septic system is. Is it, new PVC piping? Is it old clay tile? Where's it go to? Where's it at? That can, and have the tank scoped out to make sure it's not got holes in it and falling apart. So there's definitely a lot of due diligence when it comes to a septic system if you got one.
Yeah. Thank you for answering Jamar's question there. Chuck, I just wanted to take a second and thank you for coming on with me. It's been about an hour that we've been chatting. If there's someone that wants to reach out to you, that wants to connect with you, either they want to chat about RV parks, or maybe they want to chat about short-term rentals or owning a construction business, where should they reach you?
They could definitely reach me on Facebook, and send me a message. My name's Chuck Noyd on Facebook, so you can find me fairly easy. Otherwise, I don't know if you can post by email. It's just noidcharles@gmail.com. You can send me a message on there and I can get a hold of you as well. So I definitely love to help answer questions. Somebody's got them.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Chuck, I'll give you the last word. If you want to say anything to the audience, any words of advice, if you have anything you want to put on the billboard, now's your chance.
No, I just appreciate you having me on there. It's great seeing everything you're doing too. That's what being in these groups are for. So if anybody out there is questioning whether or not to join a mastermind, that has been the biggest life changer I had. I joined one here in the Quad Cities with Matt Larson 5 years ago, and just continued to keep going into different ones and getting into bigger and better rooms. So that's, if you have a goal, getting around people that have the same goals, and you'll wind up there for certain.
Well, Chuck, thanks again for joining us. And for everyone who's watching, I go live every single Thursday at 6 p.m. Central. If you guys are interested in joining, we have capital conversations with interesting guests just like Chuck Noyd and some other folks that are crushing it in real estate. So join us every Thursday at 6 p.m. Central. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks.